Good morning, everyone. As Father Loy had mentioned last week, we are beginning our increased offertory program this weekend, and I'll talk about that in a little bit later on in the homily. But I wanted to start with some reflection on the gospel reading. And so in the gospel reading, we hear this very famous story of the transfiguration of Jesus, and Jesus and his disciples go up the mountain to pray. That's throughout Luke's gospel, is that going to the mountain is a place of prayer. That really resonates with me. As you know, I enjoy backpacking, and my first backpacking trip in the mountains was in northern New Mexico at Philmont Scout Ranch back when I was in college, and I went on a 10-day trek there, and I remember just the experience of getting into the mountains, getting above the tree line, being able to see the beauty and the grandeur, and having a sense of closeness and special connection to God in that midst, right? And the second time, well, actually, I was going to tell you, I'm supposed to go back there this summer. So you might remember that 2 summers ago, I was supposed to go with our scout troop out there, and I had a biopsy on my lung, and that was benign, but the biopsy procedure pierced the lung, and so it collapsed, and so I couldn't go backpacking. So I get to go again this summer after a knee replacement and back surgery, but. So I'm really looking forward to it. The second backpacking trip that I took was to Glacier National Park. And I remember the experience of getting again to the tree line and an overwhelming sense of, it's good to be here. This is where I belong. This is home, right? And so we all in our lives have those kinds of mountaintop experiences. In my spiritual life too, I've had that sense of different occasions where there's a transcendence and beauty and presence of God that are very special to me, right? And we all have those kinds of experiences. The disciples in today's gospel have that kind of a mountaintop experience, that kind of encounter with the transcendence of God on top of the mountain with Jesus. They see him transformed into glory. And in that moment, Peter is the one who says, it's good to be here. It's that sense of connection, right? It's good to be here, and we should build 3 booths or 3 tents or 3 tabernacles, a place of worship in the wilderness for you and for Jesus, for Elijah and for Moses, right? And then the scripture tells us this beautiful line, he didn't know what he was saying, right? He didn't know what he was saying. What was he missing in saying that? About building 3 booths, right? I think there's 2 things that he was missing. The first is he was missing a full sense of who Jesus was. And the second thing is that he was missing the full sense of what Jesus' mission was, what his action and activity were. And so Peter wants to stay there on the mountaintop, but Jesus himself, God corrects Peter's misunderstanding by speaking from the cloud and saying, this is my chosen son, listen to him. So Peter would have said, let's build a tabernacle for Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, that they were all kind of the same. But God is saying, no, Jesus is unique. He is my beloved son. Listen to him. In the past, you've listened to Moses and Elijah, to the law and to the prophets. Now listen to Jesus, that he's actually the fulfillment of the law and the prophets, that he himself is the tabernacle. He is the one who has the presence of God. God made man in this world. And the second thing is that Peter then wanted to stay on the mountaintop, right? But Jesus, in his mission, as he and Elijah and Moses had talked about, needed to go down the mountain, needed to go back into the valley to carry out his ministry, and eventually to lead the exodus that he would accomplish in Jerusalem, his suffering, his death, and his resurrection. Like Exodus brought the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, that Jesus is leading all people out of slavery to sin and new life in him, right? And so they needed to come down the mountain. Often we do too, right? When we have our own mountaintop experiences, we need to come down the mountain. And it is actually in the valley that we encounter God as well. We encounter him in the details of our daily lives, in the small sacrifices that we make, in the love that we share. In all these ways, we are also encountering in an intimate way God's presence. And so on the mountaintop, we may have this wonderful experience and we encounter God's transcendence, and in the valley, we come to encounter him in the intimacy of our lives. That God is present with us as we walk through each day. It's really at a valley moment to talk about our increased offertory program. right? This is not necessarily a transcendent moment, but it is a moment where God dwells with us in the details of our lives as a community. And so I wanted to go into that a little bit. And you may recall last September that I gave a state of the parish and had a good conversation with everyone, shared a lot of information, especially in October. We sent a mailing out about what our financial situation was. And you may recall, just in brief, and you can go back if you want more detail, but in brief, we'd had some budgeting difficulties last year. We'd had some expenses. We had gotten our debt for the Beacon of Hope campaign, and then we had the unexpected complete repair and replacement of all our flat roofs. And so we had an additional debt on top of that. And so that debt now stands just over $5 million. And we had made some mistakes in the budgeting process, and in that, as pastor, I'm responsible. And so we've fixed those mistakes. We've worked with the Finance Council, who's really stepped up in leadership to be able to address those issues in our financial situation from last year, because we had a significant deficit year last year, and so we needed to fix that, right? And so part of that was an invitation to some of our most generous donors or parishioners to be able to do a one-time gift and to increase their stewardship by 20%. Right? And so from that, we had $270,000 donated in one-time gifts and $50,000 in ongoing increased stewardship from those families. So I'm very grateful for that. The second part was what we had done with the presentation of the state of the parish and the invitation to all of you to participate in that. And then we also did significant cost-cutting measures, right? So within our parish side, the staff, we renegotiated some contracts for service that we had. We limited and reduced some benefits to our employees. We also made ministry cuts in all the different areas of ministry. Just one example would be not having music at the 5:30 p.m. Mass. So we had done a number of different cuts to save about $100,000 on the parish side. And on the school side, they also looked at their employment. So they eliminated 2.5 positions, and they reduced a lot of their discretionary spending, and they worked with the Archdiocese to get some additional grants that helped save us money in areas of professional development and curriculum. And so all of that combined on the school side was about $300,000 in savings. So we cut our expenses by about $400,000 in our budget from last year. And so we're trying to be very intentional about that. The next step is this increased offertory program. So as we look to the future to make a sustainable capacity for us to fulfill our ministry and mission, we want to be able to do that in a very significant and legitimate way, but we want to do that either by cutting more expenses or by creating a more generous and significant offering. It's all significant, but more increased stewardship, right? And so we're looking at those two things. So this process will be part of the way that we invite you to participate in that mission of our parish community. We have a great community. It is a beautiful place of God's grace in the lives of people. It is an amazing place where lives are transformed, hearts are touched, people are served. And in this community, we are that because of you, right? Everybody turn to the person next to you and say, "You're great." So you're great. And our parish community continues to grow. So over the past 3 years, we've added about 400 families. And those families are each a story of how someone connects to Christ through our community. They are able to see in this place the presence of Christ. And so some have been far from the church or estranged from the church. Some have had no faith in the past. And they come forward and experience God in our midst. And they have some conversion. They have a connection, a return, story after story about how important that has been. And that's in part because of one of the great strengths of our community, which is welcoming. Right? That we are hospitable, that we value each other, right? We are better together than we are apart, and we can do many things that are wonderful because we are together through our efforts more than we could ever do just on our own. And so as we come together as a parish community, there are a number of areas maybe that we can see the value of that community. Some of those are related to our 5 pillars of stewardship. And so our 5 pillars of stewardship are praying together, learning together, joining together, serving together, and giving together. In the area of praying together, you know that as we've grown, we continue to have more people coming to Mass. And so that's a wonderful thing, that we all worship God as a family. And that has been from right after COVID, a little under 1,000 people a weekend, to now almost always over 1,200. Yeah, I almost said 12,000. 12,000. 1,200 people a weekend. So that continues to grow, and the connection of prayer. Even on Friday, we had a special prayer service for St. Patrick, where we asked the intercession and trying to live the example of our patron saint. And a couple hundred families came to that on Friday evening before the fish fry. And so it's a wonderful thing that we can grow in prayer as a community, and that we come together in worship. It's also in the second one, which is learning together. You know, we have many Bible studies and children's formation and adult faith formation, and our Bible studies are a place where people encounter God's Word in a more profound way and build relationships with each other. So our community actually is, in a lot of ways, a community of communities, that we experience that in relationship with one another. And joining together is central to that, right? We join with one another, and we build those relationships not as a fun add-on, but as how we find friendship, how we find connection, how we build relationships of love, and how we can journey with each other through life, that we're in this together, right? And so that joining together is very important, and in serving together might be one of the great strengths of our parish community. In serving together, we reach out to those who are in need, and we do all kinds of events. Just a few of the examples of that are the Habitat for Humanity house that we built. It's also like the blood drive for Red Cross, and all of the things that we do to help those who are in need, like the Angel Tree program. And so all these things we work through to serve those who are in need, and we do that more effectively as a community, more than any of us could do alone. And giving together reflects the generosity of this community, of our hearts that have been grateful for the gifts God gives us, and how we give that back to God, right? It's a beautiful place. Everybody turn to the person next to you and say, "You're great." Yeah, you're still great. Up on the mountain, Peter, James, and John have this great encounter with Jesus. In our lives, we've all had an encounter with Jesus, and as they come down the mountain into the valley, it's also a place of encounter with Jesus. And so as we go through this process, you should have maybe received already our first mailing. There'll be bulletin inserts. There's going to be prayer that's part of the process. And as we go through that and extend the invitation for your prayerful consideration of supporting the parish at some level, whatever you can, but we are hoping for an increase, that you may encounter God in the midst of these details of daily life, right? That in the way we function and operate as a community, that you'll be invited to make a commitment to that, and that commitment weekend will be Easter Sunday. And so we will be embarking upon that, but it is God in our everyday lives, in the details that we have, and the decisions that we make, and all the different encounters and relationships that we share, that God is also present intimately to us, not just transcendently on the mountaintop. The rest of this Lenten journey for us is an encounter with God in the details of life. The journey of growing in relationship with Him as we open our hearts to His presence in the Eucharist and in our lives, that we offer all we have to Him in gratitude and receive from Him all that He has to give us. Peter, James, and John, as we are preparing for the resurrection, don't reach a full understanding until Jesus has risen from the dead, and His new life and freedom are given to them in a way that makes them witnesses throughout the world. May our hearts, as well as we prepare for the resurrection of Jesus at Easter, may our hearts as well be made ready to be witnesses to God's love and presence, to His freedom and His salvation that He offers to us. May this Lenten season be a time of growing deeper and recognizing God in the details of our lives.